common question I get asked as an author is, how do you come up with your ideas? Well, this whole video series I've been doing is meant to answer that question. But the second most common question I probably get asked is, how do you come up with your characters' names? Hi friends, it's your writing coach, John Claude Bemis, here to help you with generating amazing ideas for stories. Today we're going to look at characters' names. I've got a bunch of fun activities and tips to help you dream up just the perfect name for your character. Let's start by looking at two of the most famous names in modern literature, Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore, or Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore if you want to use his full name. When asked how she came up with Harry's name, J.K. Rowling said she simply liked the name Harry for boys and that she knew a family when she was a child with the last name Potter. I think there's something more to it, however. I believe she wanted her hero's name to be plain and ordinary, and anybody name for somebody who grows up thinking he's not special, but then becomes a legendary wizard. It's funny to read in the first chapter of the first book when Professor McGonagall says, "I wouldn't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There will be books written about Harry. Every child in the world will know his name." Rowling wrote that before fandom made that statement literally true for this fictional character. So sometimes, as a writer, you might just want the plainest, most ordinary name in the world for your extraordinary character. But take a look at the more eccentric name of Albus Dumbledore. Rowling chose the headmaster's name because it's an Old English word for bumblebee, which she felt fit his character because of his love for music. She imagined Dumbledore walking around humming to himself like a bumblebee. I suspect Rowling chose Albus the way many writers choose character names. Go onto a baby name website and look up the meaning of names. Albus means bright white, a name which probably fit her vision of the wizard with a long white beard who produces luminous magic. This approach of sifting through the meaning of names on baby name websites is a common approach. You have a character who is strong, so you look up girls' names that mean strong, which will produce possibilities like the Celtic name Bridget or the Hebrew name Adira. But let's look at some other ways to pick names. Sometimes I think we pick names just because we like the way it sounds. I think that had something to do with Dumbledore's name. I have a villain named Mr. Greville in my novel, The 9-Pound Hammer. My editor originally suggested I change it. He thought it sounded too made up. I always carefully consider my editor's suggestions, but in this case, I decided to respectfully disagree. I thought Greville sounded a bit like gravel, or evil, or even gray, all things that seem to capture aspects of his personality. Names that seem to slyly suggest other words are great. Think of Ebenezer Scrooge. Doesn't it sound just perfect? Is it because Ebenezer sounds a bit like ebony for his black heart? Or that it sounds like geezer, an insulting term for an old man? And I'll leave it to you to decide what Scrooge sounds like. Years ago, I came across a bit of trivia that the word mesmerize, which originally was the word for hypnotizing someone, came from a man with the last name Mesmer. He also coined the term animal magnetism. I remember writing down the name Mesmer at the time and thinking, I'm going to name a character Mesmer one day, but Mesmer with a Z, not an S. Sure enough, when I wrote my book, The Wooden Prince, I named a character who turned out to be my favorite character in the book, Mesmer. She was mesmerizing and was half fox and half human, so had that animal magnetism thing too. Did you watch my video on magnetic nouns? If not, you should check it out. But if you keep lists of magnetic nouns, you'll wind up writing down names like Mesmer, or Ebenezer, or Dumbledore that will eventually find their way into your books. Another approach to finding an interesting name is to take an existing name like Caroline and change a letter or two, like Neil Gaiman did with his hero, Coraline. Or give your character a name that's old-fashioned and not very common, like Oscar or Letty. But if you're writing a story set in a particular historical period, you don't want a modern-sounding name. My book, The 9-Pound Hammer, is set in 1890, so when I was trying to decide on a name for my hero, I did a Google search for the most popular boy names in 1890. When I saw that Ray was in there, I realized instantly that name was right. Not only did it fit the time period, it had the perfect symbolic meaning, as in a ray of light, perfect for a hero who is fighting a literal engine of darkness in those books. Symbolism works great because it evokes emotions from readers without being too obvious. Darth Vader sounds very much like a German-inflected version of Dark Father, which was apparently very much George Lucas's intention. Or what about going the opposite direction? Pick something ironic, something that calls attention to something so opposite of your character that it actually accentuates their primary quality. A big guy named Tiny, or a character like Leslie Knope in the TV show Parks and Recreation, who is so positive we could never imagine the word nope crossing her lips. I'm a geek for myth, legend, biblical references, and love to pull names from those sources. In the book The Giver by Lois Lowry, the main character Jonas sounds so similar to Jonah, who was swallowed by the whale, that I can't help but assume he was named that intentionally. Or in one of my most beloved books, The Golden Compass, the villain and father of the hero is Lord Asriel, which has to be based on Azrael, the angel of death. Names that are based on non-English languages can work great. You have a character who is a lion or lion-like, so you search for what is lion in different languages, and you wind up with Aslan, which is Turkish for lion. Coincidence? I think not. Some names are picked because of how fun they sound to say out loud. Bilbo Baggins, Pippi Longstocking, James Bond, Inigo Montoya. Say that last one out loud. You know him, right? From The Princess Bride? My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Notice how when you say Inigo Montoya, the way your tongue hits behind your front teeth and your mouth purses at the M. It's lyrical but also aggressive, just the way Inigo is when he declares his revenge over and over. Listen also to the play between hard syllables and soft syllables. Names like Noah and Emma are very soft sounding. Names like Zach and Jacinda are harder. That might affect how your reader responds in subtle ways. Han Solo sounds super smooth and self-assured, and of course has that added association of solo as he's a loner or a maverick. Luke Skywalker has sharper sounds at the beginning with that triple repeat of the K sound. Smoother or sharp, they can both work for heroes. You just have to intuitively decide which is best for your character. Alliteration is when words start with the same letter. That always has a nice ring. Meg Murray, Lois Lane, Fred Flintstone. Alliteration sounds fun and can be memorable, but can also feel a little silly or artificial, so beware. Also, adjectives and adverbs do an interesting job with names. A character named Red or a character named Blue have very different feels. I always loved in those Richard Scarry picture books the character named Lowly Worm. Lowly, what a name. And even verbs turned into names can ignite interesting associations by suggesting an action that defines the character. I had a vicious coyote in my book, The Prince Who Fell from the Sky, named Rend. Rend means to tear flesh into pieces. Another heroic character I created in the 9-Pound Hammer was Conquer, which I named because of how it sounded like the word conquer. Super heroic, powerful. He also carried a hammer, so it sounded like he wanted to conk you on the head. Let me caution you against a couple of things as you're picking names. It can make things unnecessarily confusing for your reader if you have characters whose names start with the same first letter. Lana and Lakshmi might seem different enough, but readers will quickly confuse the characters. So why not just pick a name with a different letter for one of them? Even too many names with the same general letter construction can be confusing. I remember when I traveled to Rwanda in Central Africa to research a picture book. I was there with 3 other Americans, and we were named John, Jen, Kim, and Tim. Nobody could keep us straight. Also, in the world of fantasy, sci-fi, and speculative fiction, it's common to make up names. Often, they're unnecessarily bizarre and impossible to pronounce, like Cthulhu or Daenerys Targaryen, names with a ridiculous amount of letters in the last quarter of the alphabet, as well as a cluster of consonants or vowels and some apostrophes thrown in random places. I think it's better when a name sounds like an existing word rather than something completely alien. But that's my 2 cents. There are a million ways to discover the right name. And part of the fun is the search, pulling out some books, researching on the internet, just playing and exploring. So here's what I want you to do. Pick 3 to 5 qualities your character has. Make a bubble map where you brainstorm other words related to those qualities. Get out some reference books. Look for related words. Do any of those words sound like names? And then do a couple of internet searches around what that word or quality might be in another language or in mythology or the etymology of that word. Make a list of at least 6 names before you pick one. And teachers, I just want to point out that this is a sneaky way to get your students to explore dictionaries, thesauruses, and other reference books. To be clear, reference books are some of my favorite books that I own. Creative people collect them. I hope this video gives you new ideas for how to generate interesting names for your characters. Thanks for joining me here today. I hope you'll share this video with other writers and creatives you know, and leave a comment below, or find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm John Claude Bemis. Want to know more about how I support writers through school visits, manuscript critiques, workshop presentations? Then check out my website, johnclaudebemis.com. Go dream what only you can dream, and go write the story that only you could possibly write. See you next time.